Imagine you are just 14 years old. Only yesterday, you were snatched away from your village home. Today, you find yourself standing before massive golden doors that are taller than 3 grown men. Behind you stand armed soldiers. In front of you lies a world designed to spend the next 4 years systematically wiping away every single thing that makes you who you are. As the doors swing open, music fills the air and the smell of perfume is so heavy it makes your eyes sting. You see women draped in silks that cost more than your entire village could earn in a year. To an outsider, this looks like a paradise. In reality, it is the most advanced psychological torture facility ever constructed. Welcome to the Harami Humayun, the imperial harem of the Ottoman Empire. For hundreds of years, the Western world made up fantasies about this place. Artists painted scenes of silk pillows, fountains flowing with wine, and willing women. But that was all a lie. A carefully built piece of propaganda hiding the darkest secrets of the most powerful empire on earth. The truth is that this was not a palace of pleasure. It was a machine designed to break the human mind, costing more to run than the entire army of Spain. It was a factory where they mastered the art of destroying a person's identity without leaving a single bruise on their skin. What I am going to show you is not just a guess. It is backed up by Ottoman court records, the stories of survivors, and evidence literally scratched into the stone walls of Topkapi Palace. If you stay until the end, you will understand why some women chose to end their lives rather than live in unlimited luxury. Before we go any further, you must realize something. What took place in those golden rooms is not just old history. The mental tricks perfected in the Ottoman Harem are the same ones used today by cults and abusive systems of control. If you believe that hidden history needs to be brought into the light, even when it is painful, please hit the like button and subscribe, because we are about to enter a nightmare that history tried to bury. Let us discuss how they turned kidnapped girls into willing captives. Here is what most people never tell you. In the 1500s, during the time of Sultan Suleiman, the yearly budget for this place was the equivalent of $500 million today. Keeping 300 women cost more than the entire Ottoman navy or the total taxes of France. Why would an empire spend such a crazy amount of money? It was because they were not just keeping companions, they were running a factory of control. Each woman was a piece in the most dangerous game of power on the planet. But the true horror was not in the money, it was in the rituals. Let me walk you through what happened the moment you passed those golden doors. First, they murdered your name. Not in a poetic way, but literally, in a ceremony called the erasing. Older women took you to a room known as the Chamber of Silent Tears. They wrote your birth name on a piece of paper and burned it in a golden bowl while you watched. You were then given a generic Turkish name like Fatma or Aisha. It was not a name, it was a serial number. Next was your religion. If you were Christian or Jewish, your old prayers were now called sins. You were not taught faith, you were taught how to act for survival. Then came the physical inspection. This was truly heartless. You were stripped completely naked in a room where at least 10 women watched you. This was not for health, it was an inspection of livestock. They measured your body to see if you could have children and checked your teeth as if you were a horse. They verified your virginity with a coldness that would make your blood freeze. Official records describe this with boring business-like detail. Item 1: Circassian girl, 14 years, wide hips, good teeth, certified virgin. One survivor later wrote, "I felt my soul leave my body and watch from above as they poked at what was left of me. That day the girl I used to be died forever." The final blow to your spirit was losing your language. You were forbidden from speaking your native tongue. If you did, you were whipped. You learned Turkish not to talk to others, but so you would stop being able to think in your mother's language. It was the final cut to your humanity. The system also had guards to make sure you could never escape, even in your thoughts. These were the black eunuchs. These men had been taken as boys, mutilated, and raised inside the palace. They knew nothing else and were the harshest overseers you could imagine. Think about the mental state of these men. They had suffered their own trauma and had their lives destroyed. Instead of feeling sorry for the girls, they became cruel. The leader of these men was one of the most powerful people in the empire. He controlled the money and decided who lived or died. He ruled through fear, watching every tear and every whisper. Punishments included whipping, days in a dark room alone, or starvation. But the worst part was the lies. They would tell you your family was dead and your village was gone, just so you would feel like you had nowhere else to go. By the end of this process, you were a blank slate, ready to be programmed. The Ottomans did not just use violence to break you, they used a 4-year plan of mental conditioning so effective that modern experts still study it. They made you forget you ever wanted to be free. Once your identity was gone, the real training began. Every hour was planned. You learned poetry to praise the Sultan. You learned manners to make your submission automatic. Even music and dance were used as tools for control. The most disturbing part was the language of silence. You were taught to communicate only through tiny gestures or glances because speaking out loud was too risky. This created a deep paranoia where women began to love their captors because they had no one else. They also used the mirror ritual. Every morning, you had to look at yourself and say, "I am grateful for my place." Day after day, you stared at the stranger in the mirror until you could no longer remember the girl you used to be. They also used random rewards and punishments. If you did well, you might get a sweet snack. If you did poorly, you were locked away. Because the rewards were random, you stopped trying to control your own life and just accepted whatever happened. Finally, they turned the women against each other. You were told everyone was a sister, but also a rival. Trust was impossible because your friend might report you to the guards just to get a better silk scarf. After 4 years, the girl who entered was gone. In her place was a broken tool. But this was just the start of the ritual that truly shattered women, the nights with the Sultan. This was not a romance. It was a ritual of power. Every Thursday, the Sultan's mother would pick a woman. The choice was about politics, not beauty. The chosen woman was washed in expensive milk and covered in gold, but she was being prepared like an animal for sacrifice. She had to enter the Sultan's room by crawling in from the foot of the bed, the place where servants washed feet. If she was not called back again, she suffered a social death, ignored by everyone for the rest of her life. If she got pregnant, she became a target for murder by other jealous women. The pressure of this life destroyed many. There was a woman named Shivakar who was the Sultan's favorite for 3 years. When she was replaced by a younger girl, she was forced to stay and watch. She kept a secret diary where she wrote about the walls whispering and the shadows having names. Eventually, she dressed in her best jewels and jumped from the palace roof. Another woman, Humasha, simply stopped eating and quietly starved to death over 43 days. Then there was Turan, who sat for hours peeling the skin off her own fingers, saying she was looking for the part of her that still remembered who she was. These women were not physically beaten every day. They had fine food and clothes. But the human mind cannot live in a cage. When the empire fell in 1909 and the harem closed, doctors found that almost all the women had severe mental trauma. They were terrified of the open sky. One woman spent the rest of her life in a hospital, weaving the same rug over and over, waiting for a sultan who would never come. The stone walls of the palace still show the truth. Archaeologists found iron rings in the walls and scratch marks from fingernails in the small, dark rooms. These women were treated like furniture in a ledger. The Ottoman Harem teaches us that the worst prisons do not need bars. They are built inside the mind using silence and fear. They proved you can break a person with luxury and take away their soul with rituals. So, the next time you hear a romantic story about a harem, remember the truth. It was a laboratory for mental torture. The walls are gone, but the methods are still used today in systems that value control over people. These women, whose names were burned and forgotten, are still there in the scratches on the stone. History tried to erase them, but the architecture remembers. The most beautiful prisons are still prisons, and the heaviest chains are the ones you cannot see. If this story changed how you think, leave a comment about what shocked you the most. We must keep looking into the dark corners of history to ensure these voices are finally heard.